This is my true story. I gave my whole life to raise a son who would stand tall, speak with kindness, and carry my name with pride. I thought I had done everything right. But one evening, he looked at me across the table and said, "Shut up, Dad. Nobody respects you anymore." The words didn't just hurt, they erased something inside me. I stayed quiet, but silence isn't weakness. The next morning, I made one phone call that changed his life forever. Before I tell you what happened, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe so my story can reach more people. Dinner was quiet that night. The kind of quiet that makes you feel unwelcome in your own home. I had made his favorite meal, just like I used to when he was a boy. He came in late, still on his phone, laughing at something I couldn't hear. When I tried to ask about his day, he sighed loudly and snapped, "Shut up, Dad. Nobody respects you anymore." The room froze. His words didn't just cut, they burned. His wife looked away, pretending she hadn't heard. The fork in my hand stopped halfway to my mouth. I wanted to ask what I had done wrong, but the words wouldn't come. There was nothing I could say that would fix what had already broken. He said it like it was a fact, like my years of work, my sacrifices, my sleepless nights meant nothing now. The man who once held him when he cried now sat in silence, treated like a nuisance at his own table. I felt something inside me crumble, not because of the insult, but because I saw no shame in his eyes. He truly believed I was beneath him. The son I raised had become a stranger. The air felt heavy. I looked around the table and saw pity, not love. Even the pictures on the wall, the ones of us smiling, laughing, standing together, felt like ghosts watching me fade. I realized in that moment that I didn't belong there anymore. I was no longer the head of the family. I was just an old man taking up space. He pushed his plate away and left the room, muttering under his breath. His words echoed in my head, over and over, until I couldn't hear anything else. I sat there long after he was gone. The food had gone cold, but I couldn't move. My hands trembled, not from anger, but from disbelief. How quickly love turns to contempt when pride takes its place. I looked at the empty chair he once sat in as a boy, telling me about his dreams, asking for help with homework, promising he'd take care of me one day. Now that same voice told me to shut up. I never imagined those words would come from him, not my son. When I finally stood up, the house felt unfamiliar. The walls that once held laughter now echoed with silence. I walked to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My reflection in the mirror looked back at me, old, tired, and unwanted. I thought about all the times I had chosen kindness when he didn't deserve it, all the times I protected him from consequences. I had built his confidence with my own humility, his future with my own pain, and now he called me worthless. But what he didn't understand, what he would soon learn, was that respect isn't given because of age or title. It's given because of the history behind the name. I had history. I had power. And though I never used it to hurt him, I still had the strength to remind him where he came from. His arrogance blinded him to the truth. Everything he owned, every connection he had, every door that opened for him, all of it came from me. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, his words repeating in my head like a curse. Nobody respects you. Maybe he was right. Maybe nobody in that house did anymore. But respect isn't something I needed from those who forgot what it means to earn it. I didn't speak back, not because I was weak, but because I had already made a decision. The next move wouldn't be made with anger. It would be made with precision. The insult didn't end the story. It started it. I decided then that my silence would speak louder than his shouting ever could. And soon, the same mouth that told me to shut up would have to explain his own words to people who truly mattered. He thought I was powerless. He had no idea what kind of storm was waiting behind my calm. The morning after those words, the house felt heavier. I walked into the kitchen expecting silence, but his laughter from the other room still carried that same tone of arrogance. He spoke loudly to his wife, mocking me again, pretending the night before meant nothing. That's when I realized he didn't regret it. He wasn't ashamed. He believed what he said. Nobody respects you. Those words still echoed, but this time they sounded like truth to him, not a mistake. That was the real shock, not his insult, but his pride in saying it. I sat there quietly with my coffee, staring at my shaking hands. My heart was calm, but my mind burned. I thought about everything that led to this. Every sacrifice, every meal I skipped, every night I stayed up worrying about his future. I thought about when he was young, when he used to call me his hero. Now he couldn't even call me his father with respect. Somewhere along the way, the boy I raised had vanished. In his place was a man who looked at me like I was in the way. The house that once felt warm now felt like a stranger's home. Every photo on the wall reminded me of a lie. That love guarantees loyalty. It doesn't. Love makes you vulnerable. Respect keeps you standing. And when respect dies, everything else dies with it. I walked to my room, shut the door, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a father. I felt like a ghost, living among people who had already moved on without me. The shock wasn't just emotional. It was physical. My chest felt tight. My stomach twisted. I couldn't eat. The thought that my own child, the one I had raised alone after his mother died, could humiliate me in front of others made me sick. He had grown up seeing me as strong, dependable, someone who never gave up. And now he saw me as nothing. I realized he had stopped seeing me as human long ago. I was just part of the furniture, silent, outdated, replaceable. That afternoon, his boss called me out of habit. We had worked together for years before I retired. He asked how my son was doing at the company. I smiled bitterly and said, "He's doing fine." But inside, something broke. I wanted to tell him everything, to let someone else see the truth, that the man they respected at work was cruel to the one who built his life for him. But I held it in. Not yet, I thought. Not yet. Later that day, I sat on the porch and watched him drive away for work. His expensive car, his sharp suit, his confident smile, all built on the foundation of my name, my reputation, my sacrifices. He didn't even glance at me, just drove past as if I were invisible. That's when it hit me like a knife. He didn't fear losing me because he believed I had nothing left to take from him. That was his biggest mistake. The shock faded slowly and turned into something sharper. Resolve. He thought he had all the power because I stayed silent. But silence isn't surrender. It's the space before action. That night, I opened an old box in my drawer. Inside were business cards, old contacts, people who still owed me favors. My hand stopped on one name, his boss. The same man who once told me, "If your boy ever gives you trouble, call me." I had never taken him seriously before. Now I did. I checked my phone, scrolled through messages, and that's when I saw it. A voicemail from my son, sent by mistake weeks ago. In it, he mocked me to one of his co-workers. "My dad still thinks people respect him," he said, laughing. "He's just an old fool living off the past." Every word felt like a slap. I played it again, slower this time, letting the cruelty sink in completely. That's when the shock turned into decision. He thought I was weak. He thought I had no voice left. But I still had one, and I was going to use it in a way he'd never forget. The man who said nobody respected me was about to find out what respect truly means when it's taken away. That night I sat in the dark, the voicemail still ringing in my ears. His voice, mocking, cruel, careless, played over and over. It wasn't just a recording. It was the truth spoken when he thought I couldn't hear. That was the part that hurt most. People say time makes you wise, but it doesn't make betrayal easier. I thought of the years I had carried him on my shoulders, both literally and in life. When his mother died, I became everything: father, mother, friend, protector. I gave him my youth, my health, my peace. And now, after all that, he called me worthless. I stared at the old photographs on my wall. Me holding him as a baby. Me teaching him to ride his first bike. Me standing beside him on his graduation day. Every smile in those pictures looked like a lie now. I used to think I failed as a father because I couldn't give him enough money or comfort. Now I saw the truth. I failed because I gave him too much. I taught him to take without gratitude. I gave him everything except humility. I tried to remember when it started. That shift in tone, that quiet disrespect that grew louder over the years. Maybe it was the first time he rolled his eyes when I offered advice. Maybe it was when he stopped calling me Dad and started calling me by my name when his friends were around. The change was slow, quiet, but it was there all along. I was just too blinded by love to see it. Parents like me, we don't stop loving, we just stop being seen. As I sat there, I realized that the pain I felt wasn't anger. It was loss. Not the kind you bury in a grave, but the kind that walks away from you, still breathing. My son was alive, but the bond between us was dead. He didn't kill it in a day. It died in small pieces every time he chose pride over respect, every time he mocked instead of listened. And yet, I couldn't hate him. Hate is easy. But loving someone who despises you, that's the real punishment. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at my reflection. My eyes looked tired, but not defeated. Somewhere deep down, a thought began to take shape. Maybe this was my fault too. I had let him believe I was soft. I had forgiven every mistake, cleaned every mess, protected him from every consequence. I built a world where he could break things and still sleep peacefully. Maybe he thought he could break me too. But not this time. This time, the lesson would come not from words, but from truth. The truth he would have to face alone. I didn't want revenge. I wanted realization. I wanted him to feel, just once, what it's like to lose respect from someone who held your whole life together. I wanted him to understand that when you call your father trash, you don't dirty him. You dirty your own name. I picked up my phone again. The voicemail was still there, saved under his number. My thumb hovered over the delete button for a long time, but I didn't press it. Some truths need to be heard. Some lessons need to hurt. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to make one call, the same kind of call I used to make to help him. Only this time, it wouldn't save him. It would expose him. The irony wasn't lost on me. He said nobody respected me, but the world still did. My name still meant something to people who remembered the man I used to be. And soon, he would find out just how much power an old man could still have. The reflection in the mirror wasn't weak anymore. It was steady, cold, ready. I had made my decision. Tomorrow, I'd call his boss and let the truth speak for itself. The next morning came quietly, but my mind was loud. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he had told me to shut up, and stared at my phone. Every second that passed reminded me of one thing. He thought I was finished. That's what children like him forget. They forget the lives their fathers lived before them. They forget that power doesn't disappear with age. It just becomes quieter. I had spent decades building relationships, building respect, building a name that meant something. He thought that name was worthless, but in reality, it was the only thing keeping his own name alive. I looked at the clock, 8 a.m. He'd be at work now, probably sitting in the office that existed because of me. I remembered how he got that job. He was fresh out of college, no experience, no confidence, just arrogance hidden behind a suit that didn't fit right. I called in a favor. One call to an old business partner, one word of trust from me, and the job was his. I gave him that chance. I gave him every chance. And now, that same boy told me nobody respected me. I poured myself a cup of coffee, my hand steady this time. The voicemail was still saved on my phone, his voice mocking me. My dad still thinks people respect him. He's just an old fool. Every word echoed through my chest like a drum beat. He didn't know that his so-called old fool still had people who respected him. People who had seen me work, lead, and build from nothing. I didn't need to scream for respect. I had already earned it, and that was something he could never take away. The world might see me as an old man, but old men remember everything. We remember the doors we opened, the people we helped, and the bridges we built when our children were still learning how to walk. I wasn't powerless. I was patient. And patience is something no young man understands until it's too late. I didn't want to destroy him. I wanted to remind him who I was before he forgot. So, I made the call. I called the same man who gave my son his job. He answered with warmth, the kind of respect my own son never gave me. "It's been too long," he said. I told him I needed a favor, not for me, but for a lesson that had to be taught. I played the voicemail. I didn't say a word as the recording filled the silence. When it ended, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I understand." That was all. I didn't need to explain. He knew exactly what kind of lesson this was. I hung up the phone and sat back, feeling the air shift around me. For the first time in years, I felt no weakness, no sadness, only clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was a father reminding a son that respect is a currency more valuable than money, and he had spent his last coin. The reminder wasn't about power, it was about balance. I had built everything with love, and now he would watch how quickly love can turn to silence when it's taken for granted. By the time the afternoon came, I knew he had received the news. My phone buzzed again and again, his calls, his messages, his panic. I didn't answer. Let him feel the same silence he gave me that night at the table. Let him sit in it and understand what those words cost him. Because when he told me nobody respected me, he was really talking about himself. He just didn't know it yet. I looked around the house one more time and smiled faintly. The world might see wrinkles on my face, but behind them lived a man who had built his son's empire. And if I could build it, I could take it apart with a single word. Respect. That was the reminder, the kind he would never forget again. The moment came faster than I expected. The sun had barely risen when my phone started buzzing nonstop. I didn't need to check who it was. I already knew. His boss must have heard the voicemail and acted quickly, faster than I thought he would. The company had a strict policy about professional behavior, and mocking a client or senior figure, especially me, the founder, was enough to cause chaos. I sat quietly, listening to the vibration of my phone echo through the house like distant thunder. It wasn't anger I felt, it was calm. Cold, steady calm. For years, I stayed silent as he spoke over me, dismissed me, embarrassed me in front of others. He thought my silence was weakness, but it was restraint. The moment I made that call, everything shifted. The power he thought he owned was gone, replaced by the truth he never wanted to face. His career, his reputation, even his comfort all existed because I built the ground he stood on. And with one recorded voicemail, that ground cracked beneath him. By mid-morning, my lawyer called. "It's done," he said simply. I thanked him and hung up. The call wasn't cruel. It wasn't revenge. It was justice, quiet and clean. The kind that doesn't need witnesses or applause. The kind that teaches better than any argument ever could. My son's words, "Shut up, Dad. Nobody respects you," echoed again, but this time I smiled. Respect isn't demanded, it's proven. And I had just reminded him what real respect looked like. An hour later, I heard the front door slam. He was home early. His steps were heavy, hurried, full of panic. He barged into the living room, face pale, eyes wide. "Dad, I got suspended," he said, voice shaking. "Someone sent my boss a recording." I just looked at him. He was finally quiet. No arrogance, no mockery, just fear. The same man who told me to shut up was now begging me to speak. But I didn't. I stayed silent, letting him feel every second of his own words return to him. He started pacing, cursing, blaming everyone but himself. I didn't move. I didn't answer. I just watched. He looked smaller now, not physically, but in spirit. The pride that once filled every corner of his voice was gone. In its place was confusion, shame, and regret. He couldn't hide from the truth anymore. The same mouth that called me worthless had destroyed his own life. And that was the lesson he needed. When he finally stopped pacing, he looked at me, eyes full of desperation. "Dad," he whispered, "you know people there. Please fix this." That was the moment. The exact moment I had waited for. The arrogance was gone. replaced by a fragile kind of humility. He finally realized what respect meant, what power really was, and who had carried it all along. I stood up slowly, looked at him once, and said nothing. Then I walked to my room and closed the door. Sometimes silence teaches louder than any speech ever could. Behind the door, I leaned against the wall and breathed deeply. I wasn't proud of what I did, but I wasn't ashamed either. A father shouldn't have to destroy his own son to be seen, but sometimes life leaves no other choice. Cruelty was never my goal, understanding was. He needed to learn that every insult has a cost, and sometimes that cost is everything you thought you owned. That evening, he left the house without another word. I didn't ask where he was going. Maybe he went to his friends, maybe to the bar. It didn't matter. For the first time in years, the house felt peaceful. Quiet, yes, but peaceful. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. Outside, the dogs slept near the gate, the same place I used to feed them when he mocked me. I smiled faintly. At least they knew loyalty better than my own blood did. When the night fell, my phone buzzed again, a message from his boss. "He'll be fine," it read. But he learned a hard lesson today. I replied with 2 words. "Thank you." Then I turned off the lights and went to bed, finally at peace. The moment had passed, but the silence it left behind would stay forever. The call that started everything wasn't loud, it wasn't angry. It was quiet, deliberate, almost gentle. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I dialed his boss's number the same way I used to call years ago when I recommended my son for the position. Back then, my tone carried pride. This time, it carried truth. The man on the other end still respected me. That much was clear in his voice. He answered warmly, asked about my health, said it had been too long since we last spoke. I didn't waste time. I told him I needed to play something. Then I pressed play on the voicemail. The words filled the line like poison. My son's voice came through, confident, mocking, venomous. "My dad still thinks people respect him. He's just an old fool." Silence followed. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then his boss exhaled deeply and said, "I'm sorry you had to hear that." I told him not to be. I had already heard it before, the first time it was spoken. This was just proof. Proof that respect, once gone, doesn't hide quietly. It announces itself in front of the wrong people. I didn't tell his boss what to do. I didn't ask for punishment. I just said, "You should know the kind of man you employ." Then I hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone, the silence heavy around me. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was sadness. But it was a clean kind of sadness. The kind that comes when you finally stop pretending things will change. Parents like me, we keep forgiving, thinking love will heal disrespect. But sometimes love just makes the wound deeper. The call wasn't revenge. It was truth being handed to the world, one recording at a time. And truth, no matter how heavy, always finds its place. Within an hour, my phone buzzed again. A message from his boss. "We'll handle this." Short, formal, decisive. That was enough. I didn't need to see what came next. I already knew. Respect isn't something you can fake for long. It always catches up. My son had climbed on a ladder I built, but he forgot who put the first step there. Now the same ladder was shaking beneath his feet. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. The dogs outside barked at nothing. The clock ticked slowly. Everything felt calm. I thought about the man I used to be, younger, softer, full of patience. That man would have cried after that call. But not now. I'd spent a lifetime being kind, and kindness had only made him crueler. There comes a day when even the calmest man has to choose silence over suffering. That was my day. Later that afternoon, I received another call, this time from someone inside the company, an old friend. He said, "Your boy's been called into HR. He's in trouble." I didn't reply. What was there to say? The world was doing what I no longer needed to. Life was handing him the mirror I had carried for years, the one he refused to look into. He would finally see what kind of man he had become, not through my eyes, but through his own mistakes. I didn't tell anyone about what I'd done. Not family, not friends. Some truths don't need an audience. I just went on with my day as if nothing happened. But inside, I knew that call changed everything. It was the sound of a father taking back his dignity, not with rage, but with control. I had given him my years, my money, my respect. All I took back was my peace. That evening, as the sun set, I sat on the porch and watched the light fade from the sky. I thought about what would come next. I didn't expect him to apologize. I didn't even want him to. Some wounds can't be healed by words. Some are meant to stay open, as reminders of who we should never become. The call was over. The silence had returned. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not of what I'd done, but of what I'd stopped allowing. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a father can do is stop being afraid of breaking his son's pride. The reaction came faster than thunder after lightning. By noon the next day, I knew the storm had hit him. My phone rang non-stop, his number flashing again and again. I didn't pick up. I wanted him to sit with the silence, to feel the weight of what he had said and done. Later, I heard from a friend at his office. They had called a meeting, and he had been asked to step out. His face was pale, his voice low, his confidence gone. The same man who once raised his voice to me could barely speak now. That was his reaction. Fear mixed with shame. At home, I sat on the porch watching the dogs eat. They wagged their tails, happy and loyal, unaware of the storm inside my house. My son had come home early, slamming the door so hard the glass trembled. His footsteps echoed like anger itself. He stormed into the living room, red-faced, trembling, shouting my name. I didn't move. I sat there quietly, letting his voice fade in the air. When he finally stopped yelling, his eyes met mine. There was no fire left in him, just confusion and disbelief. He demanded answers. He wanted to know why, how, who told his boss, why I did it. I didn't speak for a long time. I just looked at him. Every wrinkle on my face told him what my mouth didn't. The wrinkles that came from working for him, from worrying for him, from loving him when he didn't deserve it. He was angry now, but not at the situation. At himself. He just didn't know it yet. When he finally stopped shouting, I told him, "You did this." My voice was calm. Too calm. He looked lost, like a child caught lying for the first time. I could see his mind racing, trying to find excuses, trying to find someone else to blame. But there was no one left. Everyone at the office knew what he'd said. The recording had done its job. There was no hiding from his own words. He started pacing back and forth, pulling at his hair, muttering under his breath. "This can't be happening," he kept saying. I wanted to feel pity, but I didn't. Not this time. He had taken my respect, my patience, and my peace for granted. Now he was learning what life looked like without them. The cruelty of the moment wasn't in what I did. It was in what he had made me do. Fathers don't want revenge, they want recognition. But when that never comes, even love turns into a lesson. The next day, he didn't go to work. He stayed in his room, phone silent, blinds closed. For the first time in years, the house was quiet. No shouting, no arrogance, no disrespect. Just silence. I heard him crying late that night, softly, quietly, the sound of a man breaking, the same way he had broken me once. It wasn't joy I felt. It was something colder, sadder. It was justice mixed with sorrow. A week passed before he tried to talk to me again. His voice was softer now, no pride left. He asked if I could call his boss, explain that it was a misunderstanding. I looked at him and said, "Respect doesn't work that way. That's all." He nodded slowly, eyes down, the fight gone from his face. The man who once told me to shut up couldn't even meet my gaze anymore. Over the next few days, I saw him try to fix things, sending emails, making calls, even visiting his boss in person. But the damage was done. His name was stained, his arrogance exposed. No one trusted him the same way anymore. And I didn't lift a finger to help. Sometimes the hardest thing a father can do is nothing at all. The house feels different now. He still lives here, but he's quiet, polite, careful with every word. He doesn't shout, doesn't mock, doesn't tell me to shut up. The silence between us is heavy, but it's honest. He finally knows who I am. Not just his father, but the man who built everything he thought was his. That was the reaction I wanted. Not out of cruelty, but out of truth. Because respect lost once can be earned again, but only after everything else is gone. The confrontation didn't happen the way I imagined it. There was no shouting, no chaos, no storm. It came quietly, like a door closing. He stood in the living room one evening, his face tired, eyes red from nights without sleep. I was sitting in my chair by the window, reading an old newspaper. He took a deep breath and said, "Dad, please, I need your help." His voice cracked on the last word. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who used to hold my hand crossing the street, who used to wait for me to come home. But that boy was gone. The man standing there had killed him with arrogance long ago. I folded the newspaper slowly and looked at him. He started talking, fast, desperate. He said he'd been suspended, that no one at work trusted him anymore. He said his friends avoided him, that his boss wouldn't take his calls. Every sentence came out like a confession. He even tried to cry. But tears don't fix what pride breaks. I sat there quietly, letting him pour everything out. When he was done, the silence filled the space between us like a wall. Then I said softly, "Do you remember what you told me? You said nobody respects me." He froze. His eyes fell to the floor. The silence grew heavier. I continued, "Now you know what it feels like when respect disappears. It doesn't matter how much you earn, how loud you speak, or who you know. When people lose respect for you, you have nothing left." He didn't answer. His face turned pale, his lips trembled, but no words came out. That's when I stood up. For years, I stayed seated while he spoke over me. But not this time. This time, he listened. I told him, "I built your world. Every meal, every opportunity, every door that opened, I opened it, and you shut them all with your pride." My voice didn't rise, but it shook the air. I walked closer, not to scare him, but to make him see the truth in my eyes. "You called me old. You told me to shut up. You said no one respects me. But now you stand here because respect was all I ever gave you. And now you have none left." He tried to speak, but I raised my hand. "Don't. You said enough already." He dropped his head, shoulders shaking. I saw shame for the first time. Real shame. The kind that doesn't fade when the tears dry. He mumbled something about being sorry, about not meaning it. But I knew he did. Cruelty always hides behind, "I didn't mean it." I told him, "You can apologize, but that doesn't make it right. You can cry, but that doesn't make it undone. You'll have to live with your words, just like I lived with them." Then I turned toward the door. He followed me, asking where I was going. I said, "To remind the world who you forgot I was." I opened the door and walked out into the evening air. The streetlights flickered, the air smelled like rain, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Behind me, he called out again, but I didn't stop. I didn't need to. The confrontation wasn't about yelling. It was about ending the silence the right way. Later that night, I sat outside, watching the stars appear. The house behind me was quiet. He stayed inside, probably sitting where I once sat, wondering how everything fell apart so fast. But it didn't fall apart fast. It fell apart slowly. Every time he disrespected me, every time I stayed quiet, every time I forgave too easily. This was just the final piece. I didn't hate him. I couldn't. A father never truly hates his son. But love doesn't mean blindness. It means knowing when to stop protecting someone from the truth. And that night, he faced it. The truth that respect isn't given because of blood, it's given because of behavior. The confrontation ended without a word. Just silence. But it was enough. Because in that silence, he finally heard everything I had been saying all my life. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It came slowly, piece by piece, like a building cracking from the inside. The next morning, he didn't leave his room. The man who once walked around the house with pride, barking orders and laughing loudly, was now silent. I could hear him pacing behind the door, opening drawers, making phone calls that ended too quickly. His voice was lower, weaker, filled with panic. I didn't interrupt. I had done enough. The world was doing the rest. By afternoon, he came out looking pale and lost. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes red. He looked at me, waiting for me to say something. Maybe to offer comfort, maybe to fix what was broken. But I stayed quiet. I had fixed things for him all his life. This time, he had to fix it himself. He tried to talk, his lips trembling, but the words didn't come. He just stood there, a shadow of the man who once called me useless. Later that day, his wife packed a small bag and left. I watched her walk out the door without a word. She didn't even look back. Maybe she had seen what I'd seen all along, the emptiness behind his arrogance. Without the job, without the respect, without the power, there was nothing left for her to admire. He stood by the window as she left, whispering her name under his breath. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. The phone calls stopped. The friends who used to visit disappeared. The co-workers he once mocked turned their backs. He wasn't the golden man anymore. He was just another failure in a world that forgets quickly. Every sound in the house, the ticking clock, the closing door, the hum of the refrigerator, felt like it was reminding him of what he had lost. He avoided my eyes for days. When we crossed paths, he would lower his head, too ashamed to speak. I didn't say anything either. Some lessons don't need words. They need silence to sink in. At night, I could hear him crying. Quiet, broken sobs behind closed doors. I wanted to go in, to hold him like I did when he was a child. But I couldn't. Not this time. If I comforted him now, it would erase everything he needed to learn. I lay in bed listening to him, and every tear he shed reminded me of the night I had sat alone after he told me to shut up. That pain was his now, and maybe for the first time, he finally understood what he had done. One morning, he finally spoke. His voice was small, tired. "Dad," he said, "I don't know what to do." I looked at him and said, "Now you know how it feels when nobody respects you." He nodded slowly, tears forming again. I didn't feel joy, I felt sorrow. But not for him, for what pride had done to him. Pride had turned a good boy into a stranger. And now that stranger was learning humility the hard way. Over the next few weeks, I watched him rebuild piece by piece. He started small, applying for new jobs, helping around the house, sitting with me quietly during meals. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was with gentleness. The sharpness in his voice was gone. The arrogance had died somewhere in those long, quiet nights. One evening, he placed his hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he whispered. His eyes were sincere. I didn't answer. I just nodded. Forgiveness doesn't always need words. It lives in actions, in the way a man changes after losing everything. That night, I sat on the porch again, the same spot where I used to think about what I'd done wrong as a father. But now I understood. It wasn't me. Some sons need the world to teach them what their fathers already tried to. The collapse wasn't his punishment. It was his rebirth. The lesson came slowly, like morning light creeping through the cracks of an old window. It didn't arrive with grand speeches or apologies. It came in small, quiet gestures, the kind that mean more than words. My son began to sit with me during breakfast. No phone, no rush, just silence and shared coffee. Sometimes he helped me fix the fence or wash the car without being asked. It wasn't about the tasks. It was about what they meant. For the first time in years, he was listening. Not with his ears, but with his heart. I realized that pain had taught him what my advice never could. The humiliation he gave me was now his own reflection. Every broken piece of pride he once held had been replaced by humility. I didn't need to remind him of what he said. He remembered. It showed in the way he avoided raising his voice, in the way he looked at me with respect instead of pity. Sometimes, that's how life teaches. Through the same pain you give others. There were nights when he would sit quietly, staring at the wall, lost in thought. I could tell he was replaying everything, just like I once did. The insults, the arrogance, the shame. I didn't interrupt. Letting him face it alone was part of the healing. Fathers often make the mistake of softening every blow for their sons. I had done that for too long. This time, the world had done it for me, and it was far more effective. Weeks passed, and one morning he brought me breakfast. He set the plate down gently and said, "You taught me more by doing nothing than you ever did by speaking." I looked at him, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the boy I once raised. The boy who used to help me fix things, who used to hug me for no reason. That moment didn't erase the past, but it built something new, respect born from understanding. I learned something too. Sometimes silence is the loudest lesson a father can give. My silence showed him the weight of his words, the cost of his pride. He learned that respect is not a gift. It's a responsibility. It must be earned every day through how we treat the people who once carried us when we couldn't stand. Now, when people ask if we made peace, I say yes. Not because we forgot what happened, but because we faced it. He still carries his scars, and I carry mine. But now, there's honesty between us. We talk less, but when we do, it's real. He doesn't call me old anymore. He calls me Dad. That's enough. Sometimes I sit alone on the porch and think about how easily things could have ended differently. If I had shouted back, if I had let anger guide me instead of patience. But anger teaches nothing. Patience, silence, and truth. Those are the tools that build real change. And now, when I see him helping others, speaking with kindness, or simply treating me with the respect I always hoped for, I know it was worth it. The house is quieter now, but not empty. It's peaceful. The air feels lighter. The sound of disrespect has been replaced by the sound of understanding, a kind of peace that only comes after chaos. My son doesn't try to be perfect anymore. He just tries to be better. And that's all I ever wanted. I learned that being a father isn't about being loved every day. It's about being remembered when the world finally teaches them what you tried to. It's about standing firm when your heart breaks, so your son can learn what strength really looks like. Now, when I close my eyes, I don't replay the words, "Shut up, Dad." I remember the last thing he said instead. "Thank you, Dad." That's the sound of redemption. That's the sound of a lesson learned.